Hey everybody, this is Perch. As we talk about the various changes in the comic industry and rumors fly about what DC will or won't do and is it healthy, is it not, it's easy to start to collide all of these topics together. What the publishers are going to do, what the customers are going to do, how titles are going to be run, how AT&T and Disney fit into all this, and how distributors like Diamond and Lunar and for that matter, the comic shop itself, how do they navigate all of these pieces? And it's easy to say there's a problem in one area and then use that to carry across to all the others. But you at some point, you just kind of have to break these down and deal with one thing at a time, because even though all these pieces are interconnected, they're often all facing their own unique challenges. And while the impacts of one thing, it affects another, the problems are kind of unique to them. Like, for example, at the publisher level, I do believe that in the US, we're going to run into a collision. And I think this became more likely with Joe Biden becoming president-elect or president or whatever. If you're, I won't wade into that. But at least, at any rate, if we are looking at a Biden administration, it's more likely that we're going to tackle the whole independent contractor issue. And I say that purely from the standpoint of when Democrats are in power, they tend to more heavily look at kind of how these classifications work for companies and close these loopholes. They did during the Clinton administration, they did during the Obama administration, and it's likely to come here as well. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute, nobody is going to deal with comic books. Comic books is way too small. No, that's true, but the two biggest publishers right now in the US, Marvel and DC, are working for a telecommunications and entertainment company, a giant one, both in the top probably 10 companies in the US, or at least very high up there. So whatever rules get passed down, it's going to affect them, which will then go down the chain to Marvel and to DC. Now, the changing of classification from an independent contractor to an employee and whatever else, that's going to cause issues at the publisher level. It's going to require people pay more. It's going to change the financials of how a lot of this stuff works. That's not going to impact the comic shop, except if this starts to change the comics that get greenlit and what actually gets produced and all the rest. And of course, the comic shop has a downstream effect of that. And the customer, you, the fan, watching this, hearing this, will be downstream for that. So all these things are interconnected. But I wanted to talk for a minute. This is now 2.5 minutes in, and I'm just now getting to it. I want to talk about the retail shop. In other words, the comic shop, the direct market. Because we talk about how the direct market is unhealthy and how it's a broken system and it's destined to die and all the rest. I hear these statements all the time. And they're not, on the surface, they're not wrong. The direct market is becoming very rapidly an antiquated system. But it's not just its age that is causing an issue. It's the fact that retail in general has a number of problems facing it. The pandemic certainly is one that's very easy to point to. Everybody is being affected by that this year. But in addition to that, the idea that a comic shop, or forget comics for a moment, any retail shop can survive in a niche industry serving only one type of content, it's becoming less and less common. Brick and mortar has troubles. You can go onto Amazon, you can go onto online services, you can surf through millions of different products and have them delivered to your door in less than a week, in many cases the next day. And that's causing retail to shift and change pretty dramatically at this point. It's definitely causing a major, major change. So that is going to impact comic shops. Now, I've been on different streams and I've been on forums and I've been on ones where I'm talking to other retailers. And oftentimes, I'll get either yeah, I'm worried about this, or a kind of a scoff like, oh, my business is doing great. I got lots of people who come in and buy back issues and it's fine. That's great. And keep in mind, if your business is healthy and life's good for your shop, super. Not everything applies to everyone, but in general, overall, retail, whether you're a comic shop, whether you're a paper shop, whether you sell pajamas, whatever it is you happen to do, you're facing some common struggles right now. It's just hard to stay in business with this pandemic, with the threat of online sales and everything else. It's tough. Imagine if for one moment, somebody, some middleman distributor, some new company, not Diamond, but somebody, set themselves up to basically get comics, order them, put them up, became an Amazon reseller, and put them up there and said, well, for you, New Comic Day is not going to be, Wednesday, because we've got to get them to your house, but the comics will be delivered to you on Thursday, and you can sign up for a subscription, and we'll do the orders for you and everything else. It would cause a major dent, because as much as comic fans, some of them love going to the shop and loving that in-store experience, they would wait a day for the convenience of just staying home and having comics delivered to their door. That's just a reality of where we are right now as a business. So these are all threats to comic shops that have nothing to do with comics. And it's really important to separate those two, because I hear people saying, well, the comic shops are struggling because SJW Marvel is publishing their SJW stuff and nobody wants to buy it at the comic shop. Or maybe the comic shop itself, or SJWs too, and they're also contributing this. Nobody's making any money. We'll get to that in a minute. But forgetting all of that, forgetting a second for all the product that's coming in the door at a comic shop, forget that. Any retail business, any brick and mortar business is going to have troubles, and the only antidote to that is be very experience driven, get customers who are going to come in, who are really going to want to come in for the experience of doing it, because you're adding some intangible value you can't buy on Amazon, and diversify. And when I say diversify, I mean sell games, sell toys, sell art lessons, sell whatever it is you can to get more people in the door, so you're not dependent on any one thing. I heard it said, and I've said it myself, I said it at Comic Pro 2 years ago, that every comic shop should be trying to get it so that less than 20% of their revenue was coming from new comics. And a couple of people I remember argue, say, oh, so 80% is coming from back issues? I'm like, no, nothing, no one thing in your shop is bringing in more than 20% of revenue. That's kind of the world we have to live in now. You have to diversify your content. Of course, if you say the word diversify, people get triggered like nobody's business. I should put up a trigger warning at the beginning of this video for that matter, but that is just a reality of survival. Now, once you get past all of those things, and frankly, for the direct market, for the comic retail shop, those items I just mentioned, they are far more significant than changes upstream from the publishers. Just talk to any comic shop that's really looking at their numbers day in and day out. They're not going to tell you that Marvel hiring cheaper artists, or future state being woke, or any of the rest. They're not going to tell you those are their big problems. They're going to talk about threats from Amazon. They're going to talk about these other pieces, because that's really what running a brick and mortar business is all about right now. That's where the risks are. So once you get past those, if you can get past those, as the big, quite frankly, if I like to think in this way. If for those of you, have any of you seen a show called Family Feud? Most of you, I'm sure, probably have. If you're in the U.S., and you know how they basically ask a question and you throw out the answer, and then you look up at the board and there's like 5 or 6 categories there, 5 or 6 slots, and you see how the weighting of your answer. You see how many people thought the same thing. I think in terms of this, when I think about the problems in the comic industry, I can visualize that Family Feud board, and it's like, okay, the female characters in the comics are drawn with tiny boobs. All right, that's probably not on the board of 6 things that are really causing severe damage to comic industry. Does it bother some people? Absolutely. But costs are too high. That's going to be higher up. I'm just saying. Once you get past the basics of brick and mortar and you get into just, then what the publishers can do to the comic shops, that's where I've, talked about and complained about marketing and how it's broken. I've talked about how the trying to understand what is coming to you, trying to understand the importance of order cutoff day and all these pieces, why all that has a big impact in what you're doing. The challenge is this, and I know this contradicts it deliberately, probably 90% of the videos you hear on YouTube, what I'm about to say. And it's that if right now, tomorrow, Marvel said, oh my God, what are we doing? We got to get back to the 80s. Hire Jim Shooter, get a bunch of artists who can draw attractive looking women. Let's start pumping out comics like we did in the 80s and 90s. We're starting tomorrow. If they did that, the percentage of increase of their sales is likely not as high as you think. Now, why? Why is that? There's plenty of videos and people who claim that would save the industry, that sales would triple overnight. Well, that's not how business works. Things don't just immediately start and stop. If they did that tomorrow, I do think you'd bring in some customers. I do think it would create, in many cases, a positive effect. I know there's some people who disagree heavily with that, but I do think that one of the things about the 80s is that stylistically, from an art style, it was easier to market. Whether you like that art or not, it was easier to market and promote those books. It was more consistent. There was more of a style guide. It was an easier sell. Easier sells typically mean more money. Doesn't mean amazing more money, doesn't mean that that saves the entire industry, but simpler, easier sales tend to be helpful. And if you did that tomorrow, you would see a positive impact, but it would come slowly. It would build month after month. It would take, I mean, people are saying it'd be 4x, 5x. I'm not convinced that that market is there anymore, certainly not through the comic retail shop. But even if it was, it would take a long, long time to grow to that level. And this isn't some crazy, we'll wait and see kind of prediction. History shows us that declines are slow and rises are slow. That's just how business works. It takes a long time for this stuff to spread out. And unfortunately, the biggest problem comic books have right now is that people who are new, meaning people with cash who want to buy comics, people with cash ready to spend it, they're not aware of this segment. They're not aware that the comics exist, or they're not being marketed to. They don't know to go spend their money. And solving that problem is problem number one in many cases. I was kind of all over the place with this video. I'm going to do more like this as I talk through and try and transition the conversation from, oh no, the world is falling down, to here are the problems, here's really the steps that have to be taken in order to get them solved. But I hope this was valuable for you anyway, even though it was quite jumbled. Deep breath. Okay, like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications. Make sure you're still subscribed because, crap happens all the time. Most importantly, thanks for listening.